An ISPS initiative seeks to mentor current ISPS students on various subjects and topics of their choosing. After seeking permission from Srimataji, we welcome our expert of the day and the ISPS community as we humbly embark on a quest to pure knowledge through helping hands. Helping hands. Helping hands.
Jai Shri Mataji, we welcome ISPS to another session of Helping Hands. Today we are very honored to host an exemplary student of ISPS who has very graciously accepted this invitation to share his knowledge, experience and information with us. So before we embark on this journey, let me introduce you to this very great and intelligent guest. In the words of someone who spent time with him in ISPS.
Jai Shri Mataji, let me introduce myself. My name is Pratibha Pawar. I am ex-principal of ISPS. I joined ISPS in 2004. At that time, the number of students were approx 207. And 2005, the number raised to 250 students. They were from 27 countries. There were many co-curricular activities in the school such as music, art and drawing, instrument playing, carpentry, clay making, etc. Students love outdoor games like football, basketball. Their favorite game was skating. They were very intelligent. I remember the incident in which class 3 boy asked me, "What is the weight of heart?" Their reasoning was remarkable. Without understanding, they never learned any content. In creative writing competition, they wrote poems, stories, fictions. The small kids used to draw Shri Ganesha, Shri Hanumana so beautifully. They were meditating in morning as well as in the evening. That helped them to become a dynamic personalities. The school is following ICSE board. In 10th standard, there were 2 students, Alankrit and Arpit Chaudhary. They achieved good scores in their board exams. In assembly, these children used to sing National Anthem and Vande Mataram. I had a wonderful time with them. It is the most memorable time of my life which I spent with these children. I wish you all the good luck and may Shri Mataji bless you all. Thank you. Jai Shri Mataji.
Not to be expressed in words. Mother, please accept our love for you. We bow to you, Mother, again and again and pray for your everlasting blessings. We begin our program with a pilgrimage. It is the holy train that will take us to our destination of self-realization. हमारे कार्यक्रम का प्रारंभ हम एक तीर्थ यात्रा से करते हैं। यह पवित्र रेलगाड़ी हमें हमारे आत्म साक्षात्कार के ध्येय तक ले जाएगी।
Now I request the esteemed Vice Principal of the school to address the school and introduce Alankrit to us again. So baby, I hand it over to you.
Thank you, Ms. Prakriti. Jai Shri Mataji. With great pleasure, I welcome Mr. Alankrit Pudar, who is an alumnus of our school, to this event, Helping Hands Chapter 2. From 1995 till 2004, for the long 10 years, he was a student in our school. There are certain things I remember when talking about Alankrit. He was a very sincere student in his studies and other co-curricular activities. He had always showed a very balanced and matured behavior in his all interactions with others. He had the ability to look at things with a positive attitude and good confidence. He always enjoyed reading books, and I still remember reading books was one of his favorite hobbies when he was in the school. Wholeheartedly, he had participated in all Sahaja programs and other activities of the school. The questions he asked during lessons were meaningful and thought provoking for all. And those questions were helpful for everyone in the classroom to participate actively in discussions. I'm quite sure all our teachers who taught him when he was in the school can always say Alankrit was a true role model for other students to follow. Certainly, he was a true role model for all. I don't extend my words here a lot, as we all are eagerly waiting to hear from Alankrit. On behalf of our school management, staff and students, I invite Mr. Alankrit to present his views in this program. Jai Shri Mataji.
Alankrit, I now hand over the stage to you so that you can introduce yourself, your journey through ISPS, and what you did after that, and also navigate us through the topic.
Okay, so Jai Shri Mataji to all. First of all, I would like to thank the principal and the vice principal for having me here. It is definitely been a privilege to actually give back to a place that have given me so much. And I would like to humbly say that I've been portrayed as much more than I actually am, and I'm humbled that I've been able to create such an impact. But just a small address to all of you students. I'm just a student like you are now, and it's just been around 15 years on. And I'm just humbled by the fact that I've been called an expert, but again, I'm nonetheless just one of you. A few decade ago, I was one of you. So yeah, and, this it seems like a lot of people cannot hear. So just to clear this, student just type yes. So this will get you done. We'll have you interacting on the portal as well as we can see if you can hear or not. Okay. For you guys to respond. So for all the students who can hear, could you just please type a yes in the chat box? We have two responses now. Okay, so we've gotten good amount of responses, so it's good to see. So just before starting, I've been already introduced by our ex-vice principal, our ex-principal and our vice principal. So just to reiterate a few points, I was there from 95 to 2004. Post that, I graduated from IIT Delhi in mechanical engineering. And then from there, my career choices have mostly been I was business analyst with a product manager sort of a role in an IT firm in Dubai for a couple of years. And from there, I've moved on to political consulting in India for a couple of years. And now I currently run my own business. So that's a sort of a small career path that a mother has chosen. Moving on. So I was told that I have to give a little bit of advice to the children as well. So before we delve into our topic, I would just like to tell you what to expect. I'm sure you've heard a lot. You've been given a lot of advice already in the Dharmshala, but just two small pieces of advice from me is to understand why we are there in the Dharmshala in ISPS as students, right? So primary one and the most important is to actually learn about Sahaja Yoga and imbibe Sahaja Yoga in our lives, which might seem like a very big thing or an abstract thing at this point of time, but I'm sure later on in life it will make sense. And now coming on to the secondary part, it's basically knowledge, the curriculum that we're given. So there is no denying that we need that, but one of the most valuable things Dharamshala has to provide is basically the other part which is neglected in the rest of the world. So the other part is basically developing our motor neuron skills. Technically, this is just a nerdy way of saying extracurricular activities. So I cannot stress the importance of extracurricular activities enough, because most of what I am today is because of the extracurricular activities in Dharamshala. So I stress this again. Most of what I am today is because of the extracurricular activities in Dharamshala. And that's why is because studies you can do whenever. I mean, they are important, they will develop your brain, but post class 10, class 12, you can make up. But the amount of development your brain and you as a personality undergo with extracurricular activities, that is tremendous. Times in your life in which you'll have so much free time to actually explore them. I remember my time in Dharamshala, basically extracurricular activities were like seasons. Like in the world, and according to seasons we have fruits. But the same way in Dharamshala we have extracurricular activities. So I remember there are some fond memories that we had. So it would start off with say the summertime, and then it moved to the monsoons, and then from the monsoons to the Dashera and the Diwali times, and then the end of the year. So each season brought one new activity. Like for example, in the summertime we'd all be outside. There would be pecan season, the walnut season, the berry seasons, where kids just roam around and collect berries and all, and like even make jams out of them. We had times in which students would make berry jam, and it tasted like magnificent. And then you had the sports. So, for example, in the summer you would have summer sports. In monsoons, we would play football in the rain and whatever outdoor could be done, except not visiting the jungle because there were so many leeches at that time. And so that, and then come the autumn and the fall, you would have sports according to that. So everything happens via a season, and there are a lot of things we can do. And here we have a lot of curricular performance. So what I would suggest is that don't stick only to studies. Focus on extracurriculars and try everything. It's like a buffet. Try everything little, little, little. You will discover yourself in the period of 10 to 12 years, and you will actually know what you're good at. So yeah, this is one solid advice. Focus on these, and focus on making friends. Be collective. Enjoy each other. Stay in touch if a student does not come back the next year. And that's it. Just enjoy yourself thoroughly. And of course, the first and the second thing about learning about Sahaja Yoga is definitely there. The second, the school curriculum you definitely have to follow. But please do not neglect this side of life. It will pay off richly once you are out of Dharamshala. It will help you adjust in society. It will help you make new friends outside. It's invaluable. So I just hope you've heard me clearly. You've heard me well. And so moving on to the main topic of the day. So just to see if you guys are still all present, could we just have a small yes in the chat box? Present as in if you guys are attentive. Okay, so the chats have started pouring in. Okay, brilliant. So we'll move on to the topic, the questions that I've been given. So we'll start sharing a presentation at this point of time. Okay, so I hope the presentation is visible.
Yes, it's clearly visible.
Okay, fine. So moving on. So the questions that have been given by the management today is, what is the role of Sahaja Yoga in politics? What should be Sahaja Yoga approach to business? And what is entrepreneurship? So it's a very big question coming from you little minds, but that is what is expected of you children. So what we will be doing today is we will be treating this as two questions, right? So the first question is, what is the role of Sahaja Yoga in dash. So for example, it will look like this, right? Because the answer to these two questions, the role and the approach of Sahaja Yoga in business and politics, is actually applicable to any field of life. It's a very generic answer. It's a very simple answer. It might be slightly harder to understand at this particular age. Nonetheless, I'll try to make it interesting. I'll try to make it interactive and present it in such a way that you can understand easily. And I'm sure you guys all have brilliant minds, and it'll be easy for you to grasp through this, right? So if you look to the left, it is basically the way I've structured this particular discussion. So I'll be narrowing down the question. Then there will be the answer to the first question, that what is the role in Sahaja Yoga and in politics and in business. And then we'll move into the second question, which is basically what is entrepreneurship. And based on what we have learned in these three things, we'll sum it up with Sahaja Yoga and entrepreneurship, in which we'll be basically just applying the principles of the answer that we know to entrepreneurship, and then we will conclude it. So moving on to just consolidating the question a little bit. So as I see it, the question, to make it relevant to more students and just apart from the ones that are just interested in business or politics, we'll see the question is, what is the role of Sahaja Yoga in politics or business or education, arts and music, scientific research, medicine, law, etc. So the answer would be applicable to any field, right? So this particular discussion should interest all of you and not just the ones who are interested in business and politics. So I hope that is clear. Can we have a round of yeses, please? Okay, chalo, nonetheless. So moving on. So to understand what is the role of Sahaja Yoga in these particular things, we basically acknowledging the fact that something actually might be wrong in these fields, right? So if we think that something is wrong, the question is, what is wrong in these fields? Is anything wrong? And if wrong, then what is that particular thing? So we generally from a Sahaj point of view, we can see that there's many things wrong in the world. Like for example, climate change, and for example, you have GM crops, and you have these bad products in the world, and there are many problems that we can see. So what are the root causes of these problems, right? So let's try identify what the problems are. We'll try keep it simple, not get into too much details and depth. So one problem that I feel is the dual nature of use of knowledge. What this basically means is that knowledge nowadays is being used and it's being misused, right? So surprisingly enough, as children, like even back in the day, I used to see that how can elders be making such big mistakes? Like for example, climate change is such an evident problem. Why can't the elders get rid of it? And there are a plethora of problems that we look at, and we're like, why aren't the elders doing something about it? So there is a dual use. So for an example, you have the nuclear technology. That nuclear technology can be used to make a nuclear power plant, which is a very good use. And then you can have technology that technology used in atom bombs. So the thing about dual use of knowledge is that there is no discretion in how to use this technology, right? So from a Sahaj perspective, we have to understand that the reason why over the period of time the elders cannot see the difference between right and wrong is because we have our egos, our judgments, and our conditionings basically clouding that judgment. So basically, how Sahaj actually helps us in making the right choices is it brings back perspective, meaning that so right now you might not find this relevant problem, but as you grow up, you'll see that conditioning start actually clouding your judgments. And the only way to get rid of that conditioning and making bad choices is using Sahaja Yoga to remove those conditionings, right? So now when your ego and superego, they're calmed down, you can actually see things clearly, even at the age of say 30, 40, 50, which at your age, it is very apparent and it's very obvious because you don't have the egos developed so much, or you just have it enough for running your daily life. So that is one problem, and how Sahaj helps in that problem. The second is mental activity has limitations. Now, what do we mean by mental and activity has limitations? So, as I was mentioning that you're going to have to do your curriculum, right? So, till class 10, 11, 12, you do your curriculum. You'll move on to college. You'll get another curriculum. From there, you might even do a PhD. You'll get so these curriculums will never end, right? But the question is, what extent will these curriculums make you wiser? Like, what's the use of these curriculums? So, to give an example, so if you can see this blue bubble, it is basically the current extent of human knowledge, meaning whatever we have researched in the past, say 400 years, 500 years, 1000 years, whatever mindly knowledge that we have can be presented by this circle. Now there might be various fields like science, research, arts, business, politics. So there are tons and millions of books and tons of lines of knowledge out there, right? But because you're choosing a career, you're moving down one path. The actual knowledge that you can acquire is equivalent to this yellow bubble. So, is this yellow bubble visible to all? What I'm talking about? Can everyone see the size difference between the blue bubble and the yellow bubble? Students, do we? This is a question in which you can type a yes or a no in your chat boxes. Ms. Prakriti, am I audible, or is there just
Yes.
Okay.
You're audible.
Okay.
And the children are replying also. It says it takes the chat to come back some time.
Okay, right. Okay, so moving on. So this yellow bubble is the entirety of the knowledge you can gain in your lifetime, because frankly speaking, we do not have enough time in our lifetime to actually study all the knowledge that is available. Right. So there is definitely a mismatch between what is out there and what we know. So we have to humble ourselves by the fact that we actually don't know anything, and that is anything compared to the human knowledge. But now coming to the third bubble, there is an infinite absolute knowledge. Like there is stuff that we don't even know about. Like for example, 400 years ago, they thought that the sun used to revolve around the earth, and with our current knowledge, we know that that's not true. But if you would have said that back then, they would have probably put you in jail, crucified you, or just called you a lunatic. And just 400 years down the line, we have a complete different sense and a view of how the world works. Say, suppose even if 100 or 150 years ago, if you would have said that we would have been having this conversation today via video and this technology works, they would have called you lunatic and put you in an asylum or something. So this blue bubble is ever expanding, right? But the absolute knowledge, the truth, that is an infinite knowledge. The blue bubble can never expand towards that particular level of knowledge. So if we look at it here, we are a very small dot in terms of the knowledge we have. But all the decisions that we make, everything that we do, that has to be, say, sahaja. That has to be well made. So how can we do it with such little knowledge? So that's where Sahaja Yoga comes in. It gives you access to the infinite knowledge without you having to do so much. All you have to do is meditate. You have to go thoughtless. You have to connect with your spirit, and you can have access to basically all the implications of the knowledge which is absolute. So you don't really have to know it, but you know what it says. You know which direction to go. So that's where Sahaja Yoga comes in. And as a human brain, we can only do linear thinking, like 1 + 1 = 2. If this happens, then that happens. But that is also very limited. So what Sahaj does is that it gives us insights from the absolute knowledge. So it will tell us things that absolute knowledge calculates and which is right for us, right? So these two things are the way, these 2 points is how we are limited and how Sahaj could actually eliminate that. So now this is not limited to say business or politics. This can be expanded to any particular profession. So what is good from what is right from what is wrong. This is how we can actually overcome that dilemma. Now the third point that I'm trying to put forward is decision making. So in your life, in your lifetimes, basically your entire lifetime is the sum of decisions that you make. Good or bad, whatever, small or big, whatever you decide is what decides your life going forward. So little decisions that we make, like for example, when to get up, what to wear, what to eat. These are some things that over the period of time we do without thinking. But then there are very big decisions. For example, what career should I do? What job should I take? When should I get married? How many children should I have? Etc. Etc. The big decisions in life. Those you can't make while calculating all that. You can't use your knowledge to actually make those decisions and predict the future. So that's where Sahaja Yoga comes in. So the first 2 points that we have mentioned, basically the dual use of knowledge and our mental activity having limitations, those two basically combine to make us have efficient decisions. So through Sahaja Yoga, we will develop divine intuition and we embrace spontaneity, which basically means that we don't have to get stressed over decisions. We just know what is right and wrong. So these three things basically in one simple line, through Sahaja Yoga, we develop divine intuition and embrace spontaneity. That is the answer to the question that we had put forward. What is the role of Sahaja Yoga in politics, and what should the Sahaj approach to business would be? So there's no specific answer, but the simplest answer is we just have to be spontaneous. We have to let the spirit work, and whatever it does, it will take the right decision for us, right? So it's very broad. It's not very specific, but I just hope this has answered your question to some extent. And bringing the mind, trying to analyze things, we can do it to some extent, but we won't be able to do it to much of an extent. Like for an example, I'll tell you. This is a small example. Like suppose you have an ant hill. You have a lot of ants there. Can you explain to the ants what internet is? I mean, you can stay there for say 10 years. You can give them presentations. You can give them sermons, whatever. They don't have the capability to understand what the internet is. So similarly, you have to understand that our brain also has a limitation, right? So if Shumataji tells us something, there is a good chance we don't even have the capability to understand what Shumataji is trying to say. But we can actually feel it through our hands, and we can actually feel it through our awareness, and we can actually feel it through our Sahasrara. So maybe we might not be able to understand through our brains, but Shumataji or the Param Chaitanya has given us other tools through which we can communicate to that. So for an example, the ant has no way to communicate with you. Even if it does, we probably don't understand it. So that gap has been filled through Sahaja Yoga. So that's where Sahaja Yoga lies in terms of basically whatever we do in life, right? So moving on to the next part, which is basically entrepreneurship. So I just hope this hasn't turned out to be too abstract for you all, and I just hope it makes sense, right? So moving on to entrepreneurship. So before diving into say definitions or anything, there's this cake I'd like to show you, right? So apart from the bowl that is at the bottom, there is a cake. It has three parts: the bread, the icing, and the trinklets on top, right? So we just have to understand is what makes this cake. Like, can we make a cake just out of icing and trinklets, or do we need the base? Can we just have a cake which is just a base, or what makes this cake, right? So what is the meat part of this cake? As we can see through the picture, it's the bread. It's the actual cake. Even though we might not have the icing or we might not have the trinklets, we can still have a cake. So they're called marble cakes. But if you want to have a more fancy cake, then we have the icing, then we have the trinklets, which makes the cake an entire and a whole basically. So What people have misconceptions about business is that it's mostly money mindedness. It just deals with profits, profit margins, accounting, business models, and all of that. That I would say is like the icing and it's like the trinkets, right? But that's not exactly what a business is. I mean, those come afterwards, they are necessary, like the cake making process. We need all of these ingredients to make the entire cake, but that's not the meat. Now, so what is the meat? I would say the meat is basically a product or a service that somebody needs. Like, so for example, what are you selling to the person? And selling and making profits is actually not a bad or an evil thing. It's just that when you go to such an extreme that you have misused these particular things, that is what is bad. Like, everybody sells something or the other. An artist sells his painting, a musician sells their music, some companies sell, say, cakes, or farmers sell their food produce. So this is a basic system which we need on this earth to basically survive. It's just a system. But if we start misusing it, if we start indulging in greed, if we start over exploiting it, that's when things go wrong, right? So I just want to remove the misconception that money making and money mindedness is all that business is. That is not true. So the meat of a business, what a business actually is product making. Like, for example, the medical profession is basically curing people. Musicians basically create music. Artists basically create art. A business or an entrepreneur creates a product, right? So now, what is a product? We have to understand what a product is. A product, I won't give you a definition, but it's just simply it's something that somebody else needs, right? And they don't have the skill or time to do it. For example, some of you must be very good at making cards, right? But somebody else is very bad at arts. So you could make him a card. You could sell that to him. Not that I'm suggesting you do that at school, but you could sell that to him. So because he doesn't have the skill, or he might not have the time, he buys a card from you. But in return, he's very good at music, so he records a tape and he gives that to you, so you enjoy music. So you just exchange products and services. So you have given a product, which is a card, and you have taken in return a service, which is him playing music, right? So it's just something that people need, but they don't have time or the skill to do it themselves. Now, so we'll take the example of a farmer, right? So we all eat food, we all eat bread, we have vegetables, etc. But this farmer, you don't have time to actually, you don't have first the land to create so much say food. You don't have the time to invest in your particular farm. And although the skill of farming may be easy, you could learn it over 5-6 months, but time and resources is what you don't have. So you rely upon this lone farmer to do that for you, right? So what does the farmer sell you as a product, as a service? So first of all, which is obvious, he sells you the wheat, the grains, the vegetables, and second of all, he sells you his labor. For example, he works hard, he works day and night, he risks quite a lot just by farming. So that's what he sells you as a service. So this is what a product and a service is, right? So, and this is basically what a business is. You can have big corporations like, selling a lot of things, but in essence, this is all it is. They're making something, you need it, you pay them back. That's it. That's a simple product or a service. So just to hit the point home, we will take an example of flour basically. So this is a bag of flour which is readily available in the market. It could be bought in 5 kgs, it could be 10 kgs. You go to your local grocery stores, you pick it up, and you have flour. You make bread, you make chapatis, you make whatever you do. So this is being sold now, but 30-40 years ago, if you looked at how this flour was made, especially in India, this is nothing what it looked like. So it looked like this, right? So in villages, you had ladies who would operate this particular stone crusher. So if you see where she's putting her hand, that's where she would put in the wheat from, and she would turn this very heavy stone slab, which would actually crush the wheat, and you'd get flour, right? So what she had to do was she had to buy the wheat, she had to crush the flour, she had to spend her time, she had to store it, and that's how flour would be made and used. So over the period of time, they figured out that this is very inefficient and the lady did not have enough time. So what slowly evolved was your local flour mill shops. So you would have shops which were in your neighborhood. Every neighborhood had one of these. You'd go with them with your bag of wheat. You put that wheat in the machine. They'd crush it for you. They'd give you your flour back, and you were happy to go. You'd take it home. You'd store it and do whatever. But then there was still a problem with this. There was still a problem that you actually had to buy the wheat. You had to go and find out where the wheat was sold. You had to buy it. You had to bring it here. You had to do the entire process. So as life got more complicated, as we ran out of more time, we came up with this particular product, which is the bag of flour, right? So now, if you want to analyze it from a product point of view and from a business point of view, it's very simple. So initially, what the businesses were selling, particularly the wheat to the lady, and the stone crusher was the product for the lady. The rest she had to do herself, right? Now, due to some constraints, lack of labor, lack of time, etc., they figured out that we don't want to operate, it's very time consuming, so these stores came up. So that got rid of one problem, that is the operating. Now, as time passed, a decade later, they figured out that we don't even have enough time to do all of that, right? So this particular shop, the product was the crushing machine, and the shopkeeper used to sell his service because he used to maintain the entire crushing machine, right? So when this even got cumbersome, they came up with a packet, which is the flour packet, and in that it got rid of, you didn't have to go and buy the wheat. Obviously, you did not have to operate it. You did not have to worry about packaging and storing. So whenever you just ran out of flour, you would go to your shop, you'd go buy it, and that was there. So if you look at it over the period of say a couple of decades, the businesses have changed drastically because the needs of the people have changed drastically. So the businesses, they followed the need of the people, that's it. So at what decade, whatever the people require, a business provides. And it's as simple as that. That is your product, that is your service, and that is entrepreneurship as a whole. Basically, to sum it up, entrepreneurship is just identifying what people around you need, and you just do that in a sustainable and a responsible way. So if you look at it now from the packet of the flour, so there is a company that sells the crushing machine, and there is another company that buys that. It buys wheat, it crushes, it buys the packets, it packets it, and then it sells it to the people. So that is, now the company is giving a service and a product. The service is that it's getting rid of your headaches, and the product is the bag of wheat. Right, now coming to something more relevant, this should just act as an eye-opener and nothing else. So a very common product that we use is Facebook, a business that we interact with. So I just like to pause for 30 seconds, and you children should just figure out, if this is a business and it's selling a product and service, basically what does it sell and to who does it sell it? I mean, you are the users, so what do you buy from Facebook, right? So I'll just pause for about 5-10 seconds so you can actually think about this. I'll reiterate the question. If Facebook is a business and we know that businesses sell products, what exactly is it selling and to who is it selling? I hope you've understood the question. If not, I can repeat it again. Okay, so we've had a pause. So if we look at it, it's selling you nothing. You basically go on there for entertainment. You basically go on there for communication, etc. But you're not giving anything back to Facebook in terms of money or anything. So it's not actually selling anything to you per se. Then how is it a business? What is it selling and who is the product? So we have to understand, it's the same with Instagram, it's the same with Twitter, it's the same with WhatsApp, it's the same with any of these. It's also the same with sports competitions. For example, we have the IPL, or you have football leagues in Europe. They don't sell you much. What they're actually selling is they're actually selling you. They're selling your attention, basically. So when you go onto these websites, you're actually providing them with attention. So for example, you spend 1 hour on social media, you're giving them your time, and that's what they're selling to big corporations. So how you interact with this, they know data on you, they have your attention, and then those companies actually show you ads, right? So Facebook is selling your attention to big corporations in the form of ads, right? So now if we look at this from a Sahaj point of view, we say that we should be thoughtlessly aware, we should have our attention within ourselves. So can we call Facebook a good product? because technically it's selling your attention, in which Sahaja Yoga says we have to keep our attention, right? So it's a very simple answer. So I'll leave this for you people to decide on your own. So if you're selling your attention, that cannot be good, right? So again, with sports competitions, people spend hours and hours watching football, hours and hours watching cricket. Although it might not be wrong from an entertainment point of view, but we have to see the level from which it crosses on from entertainment to obsession. We cannot let it delve into obsession, right? So we leave all our work, we go watch football. We leave all our work, we go for cricket. We leave the important stuff. That's when we know that a boundary has been breached. So a general rule of thumb for people who are doing businesses, or just for you guys to just broaden your horizons and know what corporations are doing. If it's free, you are the product, hands down. Because how is it going to survive? If it's free, you are the product. So this was just a little gist on what products are, how they are entwined with entrepreneurship and all of that. So now we've been talking about Sahaja Yoga and entrepreneurship over the period of say the 15-20 minutes that we've been discussing. But just to for this particular case, for entrepreneurship, how does Sahaja Yoga make a difference? Right, because that's what the question basically was, is what is entrepreneurship and how can Sahaja Yoga approach be used for businesses? So keeping it broad again, principles that we learned about decision making, about mind, about knowledge, we'll try to apply those to entrepreneurship. So a business, as I told you, was a cake making process in which you would have the meat and you have other components to interact with. So I'm putting those components down as products, raw material and people. Right. So a business or an entrepreneur, an enterprise basically is the interaction between products or services that you're selling. For example, we eat and Facebook has its own service, YouTube has its own service. So that is the product. You have raw material that is used to make the products. For example, in the farmer's case, you would have land as a resource. You would have fertilizers that have gone in, you would have had seeds, etc. So that's the raw material. For example, a steel plant would have iron ore go into as the raw material. And you have people. So people can be divided into categories: people who run the businesses and the people who are affected by the products of the businesses. For example, you have managers, you have CEOs. These are people who run the businesses. Then you have people who buy the product, right? So, for example, for Facebook, the corporations are the product, they're buying the product, and you are the user, so you're getting affected that way. So a business also affects people to a whole level. A small example I can give you here is, because we've been using fossil fuels too much, we have created global warming. So technically the products, which are basically cars and fossil fuels, they have affected the people in such a way that now we are in global warming, we cannot breathe, or it's very hot. And the raw material in this is that we are irresponsibly mining oil at a very large rate, or coal at a very large rate, and destroying the Mother Earth. So a business is basically an interaction between these three. And just going forward, so this is the explanation of slide products. And again, like it says here, even handicraft versus plastic items, for an example, that is also a product. Like you can have handicraft toys, you can have plastic toys, right? So from a Sahaj point of view, we have to balance all of it. And that's where Sahaja Yoga in businesses come through. We have to identify what are the good products that the world needs. We have to identify, does this product affect the people in a positive way? We have to identify, are we exploiting the Mother Earth or not? So for example, products could be, we don't want to have plastic products, we'll go for natural products. We will be promoting handicrafts, for an example. So there's a small example of genetically modified crops. If you people have heard of it, it's basically you have scientists modifying seeds to produce high variety, say wheat or food products. So in Sahaja Yoga, we just know that if you want to increase the yield of your product of your field, all you need to do is provide it with vibrated water. So that's a way in which you're using your raw material. It's a way in which you're making your products safe, for an example. So that is the discretion that we have to bring into our business in conducting our business. So do we want to as a company create more GM crops, or do we just use vibrated water to get rid of the problem? So GM crops have been around for 40, 50 years. So you have so many people spending countless hours trying to produce something, but we know it can be done as simple as using vibrated water. So that's where it comes in the product sort from a product perspective. Now, raw material. So basically, profit and greed have spread so much that we have basically exploited the mother earth, right? So with Sahaja Yoga, if we can prevent this exploitation, we can preserve the mother earth. I mean, that is where Sahaja Yoga comes into raw material. And plus, we can use raw materials that are beneficial for mankind. For example, plastics are made from petroleum, which is the raw material. But wood, they come from trees. So if we change our raw material from, say, petroleum to trees, that will produce much better products and will be sustainable. So I'd like to mention this quote from Gandhiji, which is mentioned at the bottom as well. The world has enough for everyone's need, but not for everyone's greed. So this is where I think this particular quote fits in perfectly. And third is the people that I was saying. So people, it's the consumers, and it's also people who are running the business. So there's an example of Teflon. If you people must have heard of it. You have non-stick pans, which are very common in households, right? So the reason why they're non-stick is because there's a coating of Teflon, which is a chemical product, on top of these pans. That's what makes it non-stick. The problem with Teflon is that it's cancer producing. So where they produce this Teflon, all the animals and all the people have gotten cancer. We definitely know that it's not the way to go. So if we provide such products to people, they will obviously get sick in the long run, obviously. So we have to provide people with things that actually benefit them rather than harm them. And from a business point of view, so we have to start treating people as humans. When we employ them, we have them as our workers, etc. We have to treat them in a human way, because naturally they are humans that have been created by God as well. So it's that respect also that Sahaja Yoga should bring in running a particular business. Like for an example, the biggest example of this is that ironically in corporations, the department that deals with people is called human resources. So we basically treat people like resources, which is basically like a raw material. That's not the way it should be, because we're living beings. We are the mirror image of God. So we should be treated differently, right? So that's where a Sahaj perspective also comes in running this. So to sum it all up, I'm sure this has been a very heavy session, and there are multiple of questions that you might have had. But just to conclude all of this is how Sahaj will help in entrepreneurship and businesses. So before moving on to the concluding thoughts, just to recap what we've done, is that we've seen that the answer to most of the professions, how they should be conducted, how we should behave in those environments, etc. In Sahaja Yoga, basically, it is the spontaneity that we have. It is the decision making that we have that guides us in these particular things. And in entrepreneurship, how Sahaja Yoga helps us is again via these decision making processes that we have. And to sum up all of this, there's this very beautiful quote by Shanatiji, in which she mentions that whatever you do it with the faith of a worshipper, the zeal of a warrior, and the sensitivity of an artist. Basically, just be in thoughtless awareness, let your spirit take over, let it make a decision, and whatever you do, it'll turn out to be fantastic. So you don't have to run after things, you just have to look at things that from a witness point of view, and whatever you do, it'll turn out fantastic. So I really hope this has answered a lot of your doubts. I'm sure you have many other doubts that might have arisen with this particular discussion that we had. So I would hand it over to Ms. Prakriti again to continue
Thank you. But before we move on to the question and answer session, you see, Ishan has a comment.
Okay.
So you mentioned about Facebook.
Right.
and what values, what services it sells. So Ishan had an answer to that. He says you buy this service, a platform to network with people all over the world, and as a corollary to that, you may also turn out to offer services. So is it a very neutral sort of a thing, which can be both positive and negative, and actually also inculcate entrepreneurship?
Okay, so I'll take it. I'll take you back to this particular slide. It's a very good question that you have. So you have to actually look at the evolution of Facebook, right? So Facebook actually started as a networking platform for college students, and for most of its for a large part of its life cycle, for 7-8 years, it did not earn money. So what I mean by a product and a service is a product is something that the company sells, right? And sells means that it earns money via that particular thing, right? So it's not selling anything to you because you as a user, I'm not saying you as a business, like for example, if you run a business and you run Facebook ads, you're actually the customer. But you as a user, as a billion users that Facebook has, like the millions of users Facebook have, they're not buying anything from Facebook. They're technically not buying anything, they're just spending their time, right? And again, as I said before, everything has limitations, right? So I'm not saying Facebook is evil. What I'm trying to say is that it has to be used judiciously. Like I use Facebook. I'm not going to deny that. That will just be hypocrisy, right? But what do I use Facebook for? How do I use it? Like for example, I don't run a business that needs to be on Facebook. So how I use Facebook for is I use it as a dynamic magazine. So whatever I like, some say products, say services, say topics like agriculture or whatever, they have pages on Facebook, right? So when I subscribe to those pages, when they post something new, I get information on that. Like there's a very brilliant website called the Better India. So it produces lots of positive stories. Like if you see newspapers, they work on negative stories, right? Sensationalization. But the Better India actually brings positive stories from each corner of India. So I subscribe to that. So I read that. So it's helping me that way. I'm not saying Facebook is evil that way, but technically it's not selling me anything, right? And if I spend time on Facebook reading the articles, I am using Facebook. But if I spend time on Facebook reading ads, I'm not actually providing anything useful for myself. I'm just reading ads, right? So or if I'm looking at say funny cat images or dog videos or etc., it can be used for entertainment for say a little bit of time. But if that's all I do all day, then it's a misuse of Facebook, right? So like suppose you have a small business and you go on Facebook and you advertise there, that's perfectly fine. That's a good use of Facebook. So what I'm trying to say is that it's not an easy operation. It's just that we have to try and learn to use things in a beneficial way, in a balanced way. And the basic thing that I wanted to bring out here is that basically you are the product. This helps you understand. This helps you understand the limitations you're in this particular life. So I hope that clears your doubt in a significant way.
Ishan, do reply in the chat box if it did answer you. And before we receive a reply, just as a corollary and a discussion, when we buy something, basically we buy it for the enjoyment of it. At the end of it, the value trickles down into enjoyment, whether I'm eating something or I'm buying a new clothes. So if I'm on Facebook and I spend half an hour on it and I get that enjoyment without buying anything, so it satiates me on a very primal level. So would you not consider that under the subset of services?
But it actually can be called a service. But again, what we're trying to thread is a thin line between use and misuse, right? So what I was actually targeting was the misuse of Facebook. So what you're saying is basically the use of Facebook, right? But if you look at Facebook, its business strategy and all. Like I'll take my parents for an example, or the older generation. There used to be a time 10 years ago when they would say get off Facebook, right? We had cell phones in our hands. But now they have cell phones on their hands, right? And now they are extensively using Facebook. And whatever situation, now you see parents completely like on Facebook all the time, looking at different things. So again, what you mentioned that it satiates your need for entertainment. Very fine. Matlab, I do that. Like for an example, as I was saying that it's a dynamic magazine in that sense. For example, I follow F1 Formula One racing, right? So they show me snippets of the races that have happened, say 1 week ago. So in that case, it's giving me slight bit of information. I'm using sporting event as my entertainment, and it's being used as a dynamic magazine, right? So from that point, yes, it's a service. It's definitely a service. It's basically fulfilling my need of buying a magazine, which I used to do 10 to 15 years ago. From that, so yes, that is a service. But again, we have to see how majority of the people use Facebook. Are they using it or are they misusing it? So that was my question.
Sure.
So that's what I was thinking.
So Ishan has replied. He answered his question. But Ishan will now open the floor to question and answer session. So children, not just Ishan, all of you can move on to question and answer session. Alankrit, if you're fine with it.
Yeah, I'm fine.
So Ishan has already moved on to the second question. So this is a similar way how cinemas and movies also work.
Okay, so just should I stop sharing this presentation?
Sure.
Chat box. Right. Okay. So Ishan, your question was: is this a similar way how cinemas and movies also work? True, very true. I was actually going to put cinemas and movies in this particular slide, but I just thought it would be too much. So if you would have listened to Shumataji's speeches, a lot of times Shumataji mentions that we have to witness things as a drama, as a play, right? So the cinemas and the movies, you are directly buying their services. You go to the hall, you're paying 200 rupees for the movie, right? And you just go there, you take 2 hours, you sit in an air-conditioned room, you enjoy the experience, and you move out. That's it. And you don't do that on a daily basis. You probably do that on a weekly basis or maybe a monthly basis. So that is responsible entertainment, right? But now if you see that in the market, you have good movies and you have bad movies also, right? So that can be used, that can be misused. For example, the cinemas and the movie industry has moved on to YouTube, Netflix, and Prime videos, right? If all day, all night, all I do is watch Netflix or Prime videos, I'm actually misusing that medium. I'm paying for it, no doubt, via a subscription. I'm paying for movies from the movie tickets. But in the case of cinemas and movies, when I go to the movie theater, I do it once a month, or I do it once in 2 weeks. So that is responsible entertainment. A responsibility also that I see that I don't watch something that actually affects my vibrations too drastically, right? And something that I can enjoy at a higher level. So yes, you're definitely right. That's how movies and cinemas work.
I think Prabha wants to ask you if YouTube also has a similar impact.
And yes, so YouTube comes under social media. So what we were mentioning, the Facebook, the Instagram, Twitter, WhatsApp, YouTube is particularly similar as well. I mean, YouTube is a treasure trove of knowledge. So you can learn how to play guitar. You can do a lot of things on YouTube. YouTube again is a treasure trove of knowledge. But similarly, you can misuse it. You can use it for entertainment that is not sahaj, that is not productive, or there is this new kind of there's this new kind of entertainment which is targeted towards, say, the slightly intellectual. It's called infotainment, right? You just feel good while watching it because they're sending you nerdy stuff, but it's not having a good impact on you. So infotainment, that's how you waste time also. And if you can use that infotainment, then you learn a lot of stuff as well. So again, yes, YouTube falls under the same category. So the question,
yeah, please continue.
Yeah, so the question is, what is Sahaja Yoga's view on stock markets in particular and other financial markets? Again, so I'll relate this back to the businesses. Basically, stock markets and financial markets, they are businesses, right? A stock market is just a place where you go buy another business, right? But so now the stock market can be used. Like suppose I don't have the time, I don't have the resources to earn money. So what I can do is something that I save, I can go invest in the stock market. But if I take all that money and I go to a casino, that will be wrong, right? So using the stock market for gambling purposes, that is completely wrong. But suppose you put your money in there in a good solid business. say the business is doing very good. It's an agricultural company or it's a company product to promoting handicrafts, and you put your money in for say 5 years, 10 years, just to help that industry and also to be a part of that business. It's fine to be in the stock market. And other financial markets, there are a lot of other financial markets, and there's a lot of um, like talk about debt as well. I'm sure you're talking about the debt market, what you're talking about. To some extent, debt markets are also fine, but I've heard Sanadaji's speeches in which he says that you should, in general, not lend money to other people. So I'm slightly shaky on that. Is where the debt market lies. But if you give the debt to say the government of India and you're giving them for like say 10 years, I think that should be fine. So I hope that answers that question.
Do you ever see a scenario where we do not have debt markets at all? Will that happen?
The current path that we have taken, I don't think. The reason being because debt actually plays a crucial role in the capitalist markets. Like a lot of businesses, they're alive because of debt, alive of debt. Not just alive because they've taken a lot of debt, but because debt has enabled them to do something which they could not have done. So ideally, I don't see a market without debt. But can you do things without that? Of course, you have that's what you have stock market for. But yeah, if you take on a responsible debt, you think of paying it off rather than like just cheating the banks for it and all of that. I think it could be a certain way to go. Okay, so there's another question: why is Twitter getting banned? So that is more of a political question rather than a business question. It's basically they're not towing the line of the Indian government. There's a lot of information and misinformation that is being put out there into the community. So to control that information, they need to control social media, and Twitter being an important and influential one. If it's not listening to the government, then the government will ban. So it's more of a political question rather than a business question. Right. The next question: why is investing more preferable rather than buying the product? Okay, so when you invest in the company. So you are investing in the companies. So suppose I'm a farmer, right? I'm making a product. I am investing my money, I'm investing my talents into the farmland, right? But what I'm selling is wheat. So maybe I don't need so much wheat. I just need 1 kilo, 2 kilos a month. But I'm producing 50 kilos, right? So what do I do with the remaining 48? I sell them, right? So when you're investing in the farmer. And if you say that why not buy the wheat, because you don't need that wheat. You don't need 48 kilos of wheat. But when you invest with the farmer, you sell that wheat, you earn a slight profit. That you can use to buy things that you do need. So maybe you might need tomatoes, you might need vegetables, you might need Coca-Cola for an example, or whatever. So buying the product and investing are two different things. So when you buy, you help the business because you help it make money. But when you invest, you are basically supporting the business in terms of its operations. And coming to Janak Taneja's question, can you explain the term stakeholder and what's the role of them? This is exactly the role. Exactly the role stakeholders play. So we invest in the farmer as stakeholders. We don't invest in their products. We might buy 2 kgs of him because we need that, but we invest in the farmer. So suppose the farmer makes 100 rupee profit, we will keep 20, we give the farmer 80. And suppose now you would say, why does the farmer need our money? Because maybe he doesn't have money on his own. So maybe we buy him seeds, we buy him fertilizer, we give it to him. So he's happy. He has the land, he has the efforts, he sows them, and he raises his crop. So what happens is that he collaboratively. So technically, you have given him seeds and fertilizer. Don't think of it as money. You have given him seeds and fertilizer. He has taken that seed and fertilizer and made it into something as beautiful as a crop. So he's invested his talents, his vibrations, his energy to make that. And whatever comes out of selling the wheat, you both share among you in whatever way you've decided for, right? So I hope that clears the distinction between the stakeholder and what is the role of the stakeholder, right? And we have another question by Heram. What are the stockholders in view of Sahaja Yoga? I slightly don't understand that question. Could you elaborate?
Maybe he means that when you put Sahaja Yoga in perspective, how do you define stockholders, like, that passion?
Okay, so
Or maybe how Sahaja Yogi stockholders should behave. Maybe that's what he means.
No, so I think I've already answered the question of stockholders in Sahaja Yoga. You should not use stocks as gambling instruments. You can use them like if you have a like, for example, I like Tata Motors for an example. I'm connected to them. I use their products. I've actually worked in Tata Motors as an intern for two sessions. So I'm connected with their company. I like their philosophy. I like their management. So I'm earning money. I don't know what to do. I've got extra money, so I invest in Tata Motors. So from a Sahaj point of view, I'm not gambling with it. I just have extra money and I don't know what to do with it. So I put it in a stock in a business. I can't create a Tata Motors on my own, but I really like what they're doing, so I invest in them. So again, coming about investing responsibly. So if that's the case, then that's what the view of Sahaja Yoga would be from stockholders' point of view. I'm investing in something that I'm not capable of doing. But again, all of these things have to be put in balance, right? If we start running after money, if we start running after profits, if we start making this a part and parcel of our lifestyle, then that's where we might go wrong. So again, balance is the key.
Heram, let us know if that was your question and if you were answered completely.
So if not, then you can repost your question. In the meantime, I'll answer another question that's popped up. Sir, there is a lot of war on the name of religion in this world. How can Sahaja Yoga be spread and implemented to stop and prevent the same? Okay, so it's a very nuanced question. I mean, it's a very pertinent question. Technically, war is useless. We can both agree on that. And if you look at it, war is just created by right-sided egoist people who want to maintain power, want to keep a grip on people. Like, for example, Hitler. He used war and all of that to amalgamate Germany, and he took them to war. It's not like all of those Germans were war-minded people, but the leadership was. They were right-sided. They were clouded by their judgment. They thought that was the only way forward. So, if you remember in the presentation, we had gone to the answer to everything from politics to business to education. We'd come with the dual nature of knowledge, in which we said that Sahaj brings back perspective. So now if you can give a leader Sahaja Yoga, his ego and his super ego, they subside and he starts seeing things from a very clear way, he will never fight. Right? And religion is just another way in which I'll answer that, Ishan, just after finishing this. Religion is just another way to control people, right? So we generally have a distinction between religion and spirituality. Given that you mentioned this question, I saw this brilliant cartoon yesterday explaining the two. If I can find it, I'll probably post it.
Are you referring to the two jars?
Yes, the two jars where there was.
I'll just send it across.
Okay, that'll be good. So that's the distinction between religion and Sahaja Yoga in one picture. Okay, so the question is, sir, how did you prepare to get into Iits via ISPS? Frankly speaking, I just did extracurricular activities. As Sir Baby would tell you, he overemphasized me reading, but that was only a very small part. So to tell you, it was not easy to prepare for IITs. But after I left ISPS in class 10, because at that time there was no provision for 11th and 12th. We had no, before my term ended, a few years ago, 11th and 12th existed, but because of the lack of students, they closed it down, so there were no teachers. So I had to move out. And my preparation experience was tremendous. It was a roller coaster ride nonetheless. But everything that I had learned in Dharamshala actually helped me. So it's not learning in terms of curriculum. It's learning in terms of the personality I built. Like say a never die attitude, a lot of extracurriculars, using my brain in many parts, in many different things, developing that. And for example, staying away. So I went to a coaching in Kota basically. So I've been away from home for 10 years from when I was small. So I didn't take 6 to 8 months. I didn't take 6 to 8 months to actually acclimatize to not being with parents. I went there and I was like, done with it. So I saved 6 months there. I wasn't homesick, etc. So there were many facets of the Dharamshala life that actually prepared me. And to be honest, in Dharamshala, I used to study, but that was during the class time mostly. And what I did was, I think Sadevi would be a witness, which was I asked a lot of questions. I try to you give 5 to 6 hours a day at least on a minimum in your classroom. So if you can just interact with your teacher, right, you learn a lot. You don't have to go outside and do extra classes. If you ask the teachers things, they'll tell you. And when you ask and they tell, that is where you learn and it sticks to your head. But if you just read from a book, you mug up, that won't happen. So it's that nature that helped me to get into IITs, the questioning nature, where you question. And the extracurriculars, they had already broadened my mind, so to accept different situations. And so there's not nothing very specific I can get to, but that. And if you're asking how I done it physically, like apart from all of the general advice, what I did in specific was I went to Kota. I enrolled in a coaching center for 2 years, and I just gave what they told me to. I just studied what they gave me in terms of material. I did not look left and right. I was very punctual with my morning meditations, and because I'm inherently a right-sided person and I have a high metabolism, so I figured out 1 year later in class 12 that I needed to do foot soaks. So I did at least 2 to 3 foot soaks a day to keep my heat down, and that particular activity was basically the turning point to turn me from an underperformer to an achiever. So basically, so we have the mind, we have the talent, we have everything, but because of extra heat in our body, we don't have the will to do it. So all of that accumulated. The moment I started doing foot soaks, all of these factors accumulated to get me the perfect platform. So I hope that answers your question. And Ms. Prakriti has posted that image of religion versus spirituality. I hope that also helps you guys understand a little.
So children, you can ask more questions. In the meanwhile, I have a question.
Yes,
So when we get into starting a new business, there's a beautiful period of flux when nothing is certain.
Yeah.
So in that flux, how do we let ourselves go to the flow of that flux? Be very relaxed and not be jittery.
So it stems from product, right? So as I mentioned, the basics is the product. What many budding entrepreneurs, they get bogged up is with the red tape around the business, right? And it's actually what sucks them. Like, I have to hire a chartered accountant, I have to hire a financial guide, I have to do this, I have to do that. So what we don't realize is that's not what a business needs. That's what a big business needs. It's not what a small business needs. A small business needs a product, and you need initial customers. We basically call them the early adopters, right? So at the beginning, the uncertainty is around the product mostly, right? So when we just focus ourselves on the product, what do we need? What does the consumer want, for an example, right? What are his needs? We basically narrowed the question down. So what we work on then is to find a product, right? So when we know that we are in this particular mode, of course it will be certain. Maybe we might have come into the market thinking customer wants product A. But over the period of 6 months, if you just are engaged in the process of just selling him, initially it's not about acquiring 20,000 customers. It's about acquiring 50 customers who are loyal to your product and who can give you positive feedback on your product. So that way you understand what's wrong with your product, what do they need, because we come with a particular mindset with the product, right? But maybe that's not what people need. We have to find out what people need. And so if we engage in the early phase in this particular thing, which is called the product market fit, um, to find out what they need, and we work on that, then the uncertainty goes away, because there will be a time in which we realize कि, okay, this is what they need, and they're buying it freely from me, and now I have no problem selling, and it's selling with word of mouth. Like for example, Teslas, right? Elon Musk did not have to sell the Teslas because he had made a product which is the Roadster, which worked brilliantly. And he created his market. He figured out what people needed. Like electric vehicles were shunned away 10 years ago. He was laughed at, right? But he figured out what people needed. Right? There's a famous quote in which he said, "People don't know what they need until unless you give it to them." Right? So you figure that out, you give it to them, you iterate and you make your product. And once you have that product, things will start seeming very certain. But the biggest problem entrepreneurs have is that they don't focus on that product. So they are always uncertain. That's where the uncertainty comes from. Not finding that product and just going on with your business, going on with things which are the icing and the sprinkles, right? But if you can narrow down and figure out what the basic cake is, your certainty will come in.
Sure.
So there's another question by Hiram. So when we start a new business, after a few years, the level of earning in a business comes down. Why it happens? Okay. So this is a very broad question. It can have a million answers, but I look at this question from two perspectives. So there is an entrepreneurship, there is a business, right? So we have to treat them differently. What an entrepreneur basically does is that he finds a product, what the people need. Maybe it's there, maybe it's not there, or maybe the product is there but it's not going to the people in the right method. Like for an example, you had a lot of hotels, but now you have Zomato delivering food from those hotels. So now the value of businesses from hotels have risen dramatically, right? So food was always there, but it was never delivered, right? So so a business can be, so food is nothing new. So you have the KFC, you have the Domino's, you have all of those delivering, but given the delivery aspect has come into play, the uptake or the ordering has increased. So that's what an entrepreneurship is. A business is something in which you just know it exists, you know it will sell, and so you just copy. For an example, you know wheat is going to sell, so you buy a plot of land and you start growing wheat, right? The problem with these businesses is that you don't know at what cycle you are in that particular business. So, for an example, the fax machine, right? So, 20 years ago, if you said, I want to start a fax machine, and that was the time just before email came out, the moment email would come out, the fax machine business would tank, right? So, it depends on many things. The product you're selling, maybe a government regulation might come out which might cut the basic product you're giving. For an example, if government starts cracking down on petroleum imports, right? So all these big refineries doesn't take a hit, right? So they can be a million reasons why your businesses actually fail. So that is MBA. That is a 2-year MBA in itself. So why businesses fail, how to frame it up. You have management consulting firms that do that. So that's the reason. But the gist is, figure out your product, figure out what's selling, so you will be always on top of the market. When you know that people don't want this anymore, you'll try to figure out the next thing, right? So you'll always be at the top of your game. You'll always be in touch with what people want. So if people are not buying towels anymore, they're buying paper towels. So you start making paper towels. So from paper towels, they might come back to physical towels, like cotton towels. So then you start manufacturing that. So it's just being in touch with your product, and if your customers need your product. I hope that answers that. Why, Pranav Tiwari, why does an angel investor play a major role in a company? For example, a company called Milk Boss is started by two people with 2 million by the companies. So I think you're getting into the legal part of corporate businesses. So I am not very, I'm not into that sector. So I don't think I can do justice to your question. But I can do justice to this. Why does an angel play a major role in a company? Right. I can answer that question. Right. So You see, different people have different expectations. So they invest in the company differently. Like suppose I have 20 rupees and I can only invest in paper towels for an example. So I will try to find small businesses in which I can put my money in. So that is what angel investing is. Now a company has 100 rupees, so it has to invest that 100 rupees, the angel company, or the investment company, it has to invest the 100 rupees, right? So for it to find say 100 different businesses will be a cumbersome task. So what it does then is that it looks for companies that are slightly bigger and it can invest a larger sum of money. So like for example, the angel investor had 20 and he invested 4 rupees in 5 companies, so that was his 20. Now a big investor will have the same problem. He can only invest in 5. So he will be able to invest 20 rupees. But initially the small company did not require 20 companies. So this bigger investment arm, they will look to fund the slightly more successful companies that come out of angel investing. Then you have the bigger fish, which can invest 500. And then you have the IPO, the share market, which can invest like a huge sum. So it's just angel investors, then you have angel seed investors, then you have round A, B, C, and so on. So different type of companies invest at different stages of the company, right? So an angel investor plays a major role is because suppose I have a brilliant idea, right? Suppose it's an IT based idea. I have my laptop, but now I can't do it myself. I needed to hire more people to do it. So I need a small amount of money. So a little bit of stocks I'll give to my employees, a little bit of money I'll give to them. So that's where the angel comes up to kickstart that. Maybe it might take 4 years if I do it alone, but with the help of two more, I can do it in 1 year, right? And maybe in that 4 year time, somebody else gets the same idea but has some money who can hire people. So he will outbid me, right? So an angel investor plays the role of basically enabling you to do what you want immediately. So you don't need much money. That's why they're called angel investors. They're called angels because you haven't proven anything. They're just taking your word for it and investing a little bit in it. So that's what an angel investor is.
Yeah, and in this case, it's more of a case of creeping acquisition. So basically, the angel investor got majority share in the company, but he is also helping the founders to expand the business to more people. So, in the eye of justice, both are equal partners in the business.
Yes, definitely. But what I was trying to explain was why does that he play a major role? So generally in India, the case is angel investors generally don't have a majority stake in the company.
Sure.
They have a minority stake, at max 30%, not more than that. Until unless they stay in that state for a very long time, which is unlikely, either the business will fail in that time. But first of all, they don't have a majority stake; they have a minority stake. Second of all, definitely the main aim of the initial investment is to make your product and sell it. So
So this example that is quoting milk basket. So it was
yeah,
started by two people, but
yeah,
Reliance got hold of 50% of the share as an angel investor, let's say,
yeah.
and so it went on to a creeping acquisition. So I think he wants to know, when the eye of justice, whether this kind of business flow can be justified.
Right. Now I've understood your question. I actually glanced over it and didn't really look at the gist of it. So what you're saying is this is basically hostile takeovers in business terms. So suppose I have 100% of the shares. I give a small amount, say 30% to somebody, and I keep giving that say 30%. There will be a time in which I hit below 50%, right? So basically you have a board of directors which have votes which take decisions for the company, and decisions which have more than 50%, they basically get passed. So the moment you hit a share ownership of below 50%, you run the risk of losing your business. That is a known fact, and that's a risk that every entrepreneur takes. And the way you manage that is where the MBAs come in. So you don't have hostile takeovers and all of that. Basically, what you're saying here is a classic case of a hostile takeover. If Reliance saw a opening, they wanted that business, they could take it from Monday onwards. And in terms of its legality, it's completely legal. because that's how LLC companies work, limited liability companies. The person who has 51% of the shares technically owns the company. So if you're only a 20% holder, you run the risk of losing your business. But that's a risk you had taken. That's a risk you had taken to raise funds and raise capitals, right? And suppose you have 20% big companies or big people, high net worth individuals investing in your company who trust you, they will never betray your trust. So it's a very dynamic scene. And suppose they do betray your trust and go over the reliance, then you can't do anything about it. It's just how things are. Just because you have the basic skill of a product designer, just you got hit down, start up again. I mean, that's what Steve Jobs is basically, right? He got kicked out of his own company when he started another one, which Pixar, which got again acquired by Apple, and then suddenly he made it back to the top of Apple again. So it happens. You have to take it lying down, I guess. So we have another question. Thank you, sir. Why does the bills of material matters the most in a startup? What are bill of materials? Could you elaborate on that?
I think he means when we in the conventional businesses, so
Right.
whatever we are buying, raw material prices. But
Ah.
in virtual businesses like disruption with happening, do you still think this question is relevant? Like, should we have keep an eye on the raw material if we are into the digital zone?
But you see, raw material could be different for a different business. Like for example, I'm doing an IT business. My basically raw material is coming processed in the form of, say, a laptop. My raw material here in an IT firm is basically the skill of the people I own. So technically, it's raw material. It's not raw material, but that is the basis of what you're building, right? It's human intellect that we're using as raw material. So if you look at it in that chart that I mentioned, you have the product, you have the people, you have the raw materials. Right now, people are your raw materials. So do we treat them as resources or do we treat them as people? So again, if you look at it, that's how it goes. Like in companies, you have they call it human resources. So for the reason they call it resources, right? Because people have the mindset of treating people as resources, which I personally believe should not be the case. We should be treated as human beings. So the items in your bill of materials have changed, but technically you do have raw materials for your business.
So does it? We need to keep an eye on that most when we are doing starting a startup.
It does matter, right? Whatever, like for example, if I'm farming, right? If I don't put in seeds, I won't get a crop. If I put in the seeds, I don't put in fertilizer, I won't get the crop, right? So the idea should be to create the crop, right? By whatever means which are balanced, which are sahaj, way possible. So raw
Sure.
materials do matter, yeah.
Gargi has a very beautiful question. Why is this instinct of doing a business?
Why do business? Okay, so to put it very crude, um, business is just a way in which we are allowed to get lazy and look at other things. Like for example, I'll take you way back. So imagine we have a world without businesses. Dargi is growing tomatoes, and I am rearing cows, for an example, right? So I cannot live on milk, and Dargi cannot live on tomatoes solely. So she grows her tomatoes, I rear my cows. 20 days later, we both have products. And so what do? I keep my product is 2 liters of milk. Your product is 1 kg of tomatoes. So so I say to Galgi, I don't need 2 liters of milk. Do you want one? And he's like, yes, that will diversify my product basket. And you're like, I don't need the 1 kg of tomatoes. You need half. So we exchange products, right? So technically, you're doing the business of growing tomatoes. I'm doing the business of rearing cows and getting milk. So that's why we do the business, because you need the milk, I need the tomato. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think we can take the Hiram's question and we'll close this soon because you've already, Sir Alankrit has been gracious to give us so much of his time. So Hiram's question and then we'll close it.
Yeah, sure. And sir, there's a war going on, and so many parents are doing spreading Sahaja Yoga. So many people are neglecting what they say about why is it happening. So, as just to put your question into perspective, I think you're asking is that why are people neglecting Sahaja Yoga at this point of time, even though so much effort has been happening? Am I right? Is that your question?
Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay. So, you see, you have a school, right? In a school, you have say 500 kids. In those 500 kids, you'll have say 50, 60 which are 95 above. You'll have a 50, 60 which are 90 above, and that distribution will go. And you will have 40s and 50s kids also. It does not mean that the school is wrong, right? It's just that that's how the population is divided. I mean, you have people performing brilliantly at school. You have people performing less brilliantly at school. So that's similar thing with Sahaja Yoga, right? You go spread Sahaja Yoga, there will be people who take it up in a snap. They understand what you're saying and they will become toppers in Sahaja Yoga, 1995. But there will be a lot of people who don't actually understand it. So maybe they don't have that awareness. Maybe their previous janams have not maybe brought them up to that stage. So as said, yogis, all we can hope to do is just to spread it like wildfire. Whoever takes up Sahaj Yoga would present. Whoever doesn't, it does not matter. I mean, of course, it does matter, but that's their own karma, right? But we cannot let that affect our decisions and our spreading of Sahaj Yoga, right? Because it all depends on the individual person. So all we can do from a Sahaj perspective is just spread love. Just be patient with everybody. Take just treat each and everyone with love, whether they are at 40%, whether they are at 90%, and we will do our part, right? And war and war because of religion, that, as we have discussed earlier, is all because of ego and all of that, right? So the moment it spreads far enough, and the ego comes down, this will disappear. So all we can do right now is just stay firm and keep trying on this. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah,
Am I-
here in this reply.
Yeah, okay. So there's one more question. Should I take this? Sir, a
Yes,
stakeholder
please.
more capital than that of the CEO who works 24/7. Okay. So let me tell you about something about a CEO. CEO in most cases is a hired person. For example, say so again we come back to the farm example. Say suppose I own a farm, right, and I have a very big farm, right? A very very big farm. I cannot manage it on my own. Even if I put all my family members there, I can only say so 20% of it. So what do I need? I need laborers. So I get laborers. I get say 50, 60 laborers, right? And then I hire somebody to take care of those laborers. And then I say, let's call him the ठेकेदार, or let's call him the head laborer, right? So I tell the head laborer, I will pay you say 100 rupees a month, and you take care of the laborers, and you take care of all the manual labor going around in my farm. I will take care of the other things, like for example, preparing seeds and selling the product and etc. etc. So you just take care of the laborers. So I've hired the head laborer, right? So a CEO is exactly that. In most cases, like in startups, the founders who are the stakeholder owners are the CEO, and in most mature companies, the CEOs are generally some other people who are hired. So he works 24/7 because that's his job. And the stakeholder, he could have been a prior founder. He could be a new stakeholder via the stock market. He just provides capital, and the CEO can be a hired person, and it's not necessarily in all cases that the CEO has less capital. But in most cases, that's the case because the founder chooses to sell his capital. So technically, if you look at all the unicorns in India, the CEOs or the founders would have less than 10% of the capital when they went for an IPO. So CEOs. Okay, so the question corollary to that is why CEO are doing less work than an ordinary man? Okay, so it's a very good question that you've asked, and I think it sums up the entire session beautifully. So I told you about decision making, right? So the most important thing is decision making. And we as yogis can do decision making with our hands like this, right? But in the non-Sahaj world, you need experienced people to make the decisions. You need people who are say, graduates from high schools or who have a proven track record to make predictive decisions. So CEOs are the people who are making that decision, right? And because it is the most important thing, he doesn't do much. He thinks of ways to make decisions. He makes decisions, and that's what his basic role is. So there's a very nice saying: to do nothing, you have to be at the top, right? But that's a very crude way of looking at it because he's making the most important choices that the company needs to be successful. If a company fails, it's because the CEO's decisions. If a company does bad, it's probably because the CEO is not making proper decisions. If a company does brilliantly, it could be because of the CEO's strategy. So yes, so he's very important. He does less work in terms of grunt work, like for example in the farm, the head laborer might not be actually using the farm implements and digging up the farm, right? But he's moving around the farm. He's like constantly going up and down, looking at everybody, doing their work, arranging things like if there's rain, then protecting the farmers, maybe even bringing water for them while they work. So that's the job of the CEO. So technically, you might say that he's doing less physical labor than the laborers himself, but he is performing a crucial job of actually keeping everyone together. I hope that answers your question.
Hiram to reply in the chat box. But in
And
the meanwhile, there's a request, Alankrit. If you could follow up the Helping Hands channel, and Prabhav may have more questions, follow-up questions. So take your time, and in the next 24 hours, if you could help them out with any follow-up questions they have.
yeah, sure, definitely. That's no problem. If you just want to send all your questions to Miss Prakriti, and then we can decide with the management how to take this forward. I have no issue. If you the biggest achievement for me is if you guys have actually enjoyed this particular session. So that is the most I can expect from this. That you enjoy this, you find it useful, and if you have more questions, I'd be more than glad to answer. So we have Hiram asking one more question. Can you allow that, Ms. Patel?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So we'll close with this. Hiram, please go ahead and ask your question. And dear children, if you think of something, any idea that this discussion has inspired you and you want more clarity on that, you have the Helping Hands channel with you. And also you can ask Alankrit anytime you want because he'll be with us for the next 24 to 48 hours. And we can also collate the questions and send it to him.
Yeah, sure.
Hiram, please go ahead. This instinct of entrepreneurship is very ancient. It's ingrained in us, I think.
Yeah. It's basically it comes from the barter system, right? Technically, if you look at it, we had traders back then, we had producers back then, we had this entire ecosystem. Okay, so the question is, sir, laborers are getting 200 rupees and the CEO are getting 1 crore. So why is this going on? Qualification, but also say right now decision making has been given a much more higher status than laborers because you look at it, the decision makers in this world are very less. The good decision makers, so they have more value. But if you want to substitute a laborer, you have 6 billion people. You have 1.2 billion people in India, so you can easily substitute your labor. So it's basically market supply and demand, I guess. That answers that question. You have very less full capable CEOs. That's why they're getting high money, and you have a lot of laborers which you can easily replace. So that is, I think, the basic answer to that question.
But there's a very interesting thought that comes to the mind that if we go back and look at Socrates' model of a society, or maybe it was Plato, I'm not remembering correctly, he thought that teachers should be at the top of the pyramid, they should be paid the most. And then he sort of, so do you think somewhere idealistically we could balance out this great divide?
So I'll just give you an example of what's happening. This is actually happening in Finland, right? The teachers are one of the most qualified people there, and that's the system that they have. So it's again a disproportion in how the society has gone forward and what it needs to do to go forward. So if you just search the education model in Finland, you'll see that they don't hire anyone for teaching business. You have to actually go through a thorough selection process. You have to be highly qualified. One of the highest qualified people are teachers there, and because it's a natural thing, teachers are responsible for how children grow up, and children are responsible for the future. So if you invest in children, you invest in the future. So he's not wrong. The philosophy is not wrong. It's just that we as human beings have taken things to a very short-minded approach. We just want to see profits in the next 20 years. We want to earn money for ourselves. We don't really care about the future. That's what's happening with climate change, right? As long as I'm a corporation earning a couple of $1 million or $1 billion now, I don't care what's going to happen 20 years down the line, 40 years down the line. And this is actually the CEO conundrum, right? So when a CEO takes charge of a company, he is assessed by his performance in the next 2 3 years, right? So he's only going to take decisions for the next 2 3 years, right? Which will show him in good light for the next 2 3 years. So that's the problem we have with businesses. They're very short and narrow-minded. So you are definitely right. We need a change of approach. And again, our entire discussion in this particular session was about how to change this approach and how do
Sure.
we bring around the approach.
I think it also ties so beautiful with the Indian thought where Brahmins were placed at the top and then it went on to the Vaishyas who are considered as a businessmen in terms of the vritti, how the society was previously arranged.
Yeah, yeah. But again, even with that model, we tend to mess it up, right? We took it to another extreme. So whatever we have, like historically for the last 1,000, 2,000 years, is beautifully built up. Like our way of imparting knowledge also, the school systems we have. The systems that we have now are nothing like what they were before. We have the Gurukula system, right? We distinguished between the Guru, Dhyapak and a Shikshak. These are three very different people. But over the time, I think we've just lost all of that. So our history is very rich. A lot of Sahaja Yoga principles are not new. They've been around for a very long time. But it's just that we've distorted our sense of right and wrong. So that's what has brought us here at this particular moment.
Sure. Thank you, Alankar. It was such an enlightening session. It was an eye opener for me and I'm sure for the children also. So, with your permission, the students would like to offer a vote of thanks and then we close this session.
Definitely. Thank you so much for having me here. And again, I just want to reiterate that if I have had any impact on the children, that there is no better reward than that. And as teachers, I'm sure you can understand that. And second of all, it's a very commendable job that the staff and the entire organizing team of Helping Hands are doing. So thank you very much for having me here, and thank you very much for organizing all this.
Thank you, Alankar.
This is Ishan from grade 9. It gives me immense pleasure to deliver this vote of thanks to all dignitaries assembled here. Firstly, I would like to thank our mother, our Guru, Her Supreme Holiness Shrimati Nirmala Devi, for the countless blessings she continually bestows upon us. For instance, this Helping Hands program. Speaking of which, I would like to thank our mentor for today, Sir Alankrit, who stands before us as an example and a role model who we can only aspire to be. I feel like I speak for each and every one of us, Sir Alankrit included, when I say the following. I would like to thank the place that made Alankrit Bhaiya into the fine personality we see and know him as today. A place towards which we do not express enough gratitude. A vision which no human can overmaneuver. A small piece of heaven on earth to which we will forever be indebted to, in this life and the next, the Mecca of Sahaja Yoga. I would like to thank the International Sahaj Public School and each and every staff member, for instance the technical team who have streamlined this beautiful program, and all staff members and all their hard work that has gone into initiating and conducting today's Helping Hands program. I would like to conclude by saying that it is not in our capacity to pay back ISPS or Sahaja Yoga for what they do for us in this lifetime or the next. The least we are capable of is to make a mark in the world, a mark with Sahaja Yoga all over it. The mark which establishes us as a great alum member of ISPS, such as Sir Alankrit, and most of all as a global leader. Thank you, Jai Shri Mata.
Dear children, Alankre, and everybody who's joined onto the webcast, this was a beautiful session, and I thank you, all of you, for the participation, for your time, and Alankrit for his erudite views. We close the webcast for now, and looking forward to many more helping hands. Jai Shri Mataji.